It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. And Alan, as we just start this recording, I realized our screens are switched. Let me switch that back because I wouldn't be able to do that. I'm thrown off already. So let me switch that back. We're good. Alan is on his afternoon drive as he comes back to Pittsburgh from West Palm Beach, Florida. Alan, a lot of credit given to Pat McAfee this past week, going from London for Monday Night Raw and then being back in his studio in Indianapolis on Tuesday. I don't know. I got to give a lot of credit to Alan Saunders being in West Palm Beach and now Pittsburgh in the same day as well.
Yeah, I wasn't sure it was going to happen. I almost missed my connection in Charlotte. It was very close. We almost had afternoon drive from Charlotte Airport, which is not one of my favorite ones, but we made it, and here we are.
We'll have to save that for another day, but I'm curious. Like, I need a rundown here for specifically why you don't like Charlotte's airport, but also the best and worst experiences that you've had in an airport. I notoriously had an awful one in Pensacola, Florida during the Senior Bowl a few years ago.
I don't like it.
And if I ever step foot in there again, it's just going to be like that war flashback meme. That's going to be me there. So hopefully that experience never happens again. But Alan, being that you are now back from the owners' meetings, thought we should start off the show kind of just recapping what you feel like you've learned over the last few days at owners' meetings, if anything, and just kind of the direction we're heading now.
Yeah, I kind of just wanted to summarize what I feel like I learned this week. Really good week. Got to talk to a lot of important people, some on and some off the record. That's kind of the best part about this week for us is that we have a lot of the decision makers kind of casually available to us. So that's really nice. And I think the big picture takeaway is, and we obviously have talked about it, but the Steelers are very confident that they're going to sign Aaron Rodgers. And I honestly think it's coming to the point where we should really sort of stop talking about it like it's a maybe. I would be astonished if it doesn't happen at this point. It just seems like it's inevitable.
Yeah. I mean, we've been on that same boat for a while. It seems like now after he threw to DK Metcalf, everybody was like, okay, that's the final thing. And then obviously the way that Art had just talked about it at the owners' meetings, yeah, it just seems further and further cemented with each passing day. Now, I will say, I guess, nothing today necessarily did it more, but it's, again, we already feel like
everybody's flying home today, so it's going to be a slow
there you go.
day.
Yeah. Okay.
Nothing is going to happen today. Tomorrow, I'm expecting some visitors, some pre-draft visitors at the Ernie Sports Complex.
I just got a text
Jackson Dart to be among them either today or tomorrow. So there you go.
Texas wide receiver Matthe Golden.
Okay. Yeah.
Somebody just texted me that they just ran into him at the airport. So would assume that one's going to take place as well tomorrow.
Speaking of running into at the airport, I've got to take a sidebar here. And again, was recognized at the airport on my way home the second time. I gave you the story about Tim on my way down. Yeah. And so the Steelers Afternoon Drive Army is out there.
Wow.
But apparently only in the airport. I get recognized nowhere else. That's the only spot. Just the one
For me, it's the Rivers Casino.
Okay. I don't go there enough. Maybe I need to go there more.
Yeah. Well, see, that's why I parked there. That's where I parked for games. So I'll just be walking through there to get to a game and people are like, Smitty, and I'll be like, yeah, and they'll be like, afternoon drive, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, around the 412 as well, but sure, yeah, afternoon drive. Love that community. So if you're part of the 15,449, we're not doing the number countdown yet. That's just where we're at right now. We might have at least one more by the time that we do a player at the end of the show. We appreciate you out there, regardless of where you're at, in the States or outside. We know we got listeners outside of the U.S. as well. But before we got off track there, okay, anything not Aaron Rodgers related to take away as well from the owners' meetings?
Yeah, I think it was very interesting to me to hear Mike Tomlin talk about DK Metcalf and George Pickens, to
Mm,
compare them in his
yeah.
mind as fairly different players. And I think Omar was pretty matter of fact in saying that the acquisition of Metcalf doesn't really have any bearing on Pickens' future with the team. I'm not sure how much I buy that, but I'll say this: I think I buy what Tomlin had to say a lot more than what Omar did. How about that? I think I
Okay.
can buy the idea of having two guys who are pretty much just go ball receivers, although they are very different in the way they go about that. Does not have to be limiting to your passing offense. It's basically the argument that Mike Tomlin was making. Pushback on my question, very fair. We'll see. I can kind of buy that like they don't necessarily need a separator, and that they can just have those guys that will either go up and get it and run people over or whatever. I think I would feel a lot better about that plan if their quarterback was not Aaron Rodgers, who loves quick game and throwing over the
Yeah.
middle and doing those things that those guys are not necessarily. I don't want to say they're not capable of it, because I feel like really the Steelers have a lot of meat on the bone in terms of what George Pickens might be capable of, that they just have
Yeah.
not even really attempted to dive into because of the schematical flaws of their offense, and then the physical limitations of their quarterback over the last couple of years. So I don't want to say he can't do it, but he hasn't done it, and that should bring some level of concern. But I'm not sensing that level of concern from the Steelers right now.
hmm And I know it's like boring to talk about when you have these types of talents at receiver too, because you're just thinking about throwing the ball, finding them ways to get the ball in their hands, and not necessarily this aspect of the game. But like, got a question here from Ben that kind of relates to how they could help out in the run game too. Like, how does DK kind of translate in that way to improve them in a wide zone system?
No, he'll immediately be the best blocking wide receiver that they've had in a while. I don't even know. Juju, probably. Might even be better. He's a very good
Yeah,
blocker. He's a willing blocker. Now he does. Juju
especially in
has his.
terms of a receiver that also adds to that as a receiver as well. Like,
Yeah. I
a
mean, Ben
specific, yeah.
Skowronek's a really good blocker too,
Yes.
but
Yes.
no one's counting on him for 1,000 yards this year.
hmm
Um, I think the other part of that that's interesting is that Juju did it mostly out of the slot.
Yeah.
And I think Metcalf is mostly going to play outside. And I think that is a little bit rarer. Like, I think there are more of those, like, Hines Ward, Juju, Steve Smith kind of sized guys that play in those middle of the field areas that don't mind mixing up in blocking. I think it's
hmm
relatively rare to have your downfield go ball X receiver also want to light guys up in the run game. Like, I think that's pretty
Yeah.
unique.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Specifically, when I put out for questions today on Twitter, I said they get bonus points if they don't ask about Aaron Rodgers. I don't know how I'm going to give how those points are what those points are going to be good for. Yeah, you can't redeem them for anything like that. But I appreciate nobody so far out of the questions that we got, including anything about Aaron Rodgers, Alan. So that's good.
Do you
Um,
remember last offseason when we had an
yeah,
episode where we just did not talk about quarterbacks? We
refuse to.
may have to have like an Aaron
hmm
Rodgers free day, instead
hmm
of afternoon drive. Although,
Well,
if
it's
I remember
probably our fault.
correctly, that episode bricked. Nobody raised. Like, maybe that's a bad idea. Maybe we
You at
should
least got
just
to
give the
slide.
people
You got to
what they
slide it in
want.
at least once, yeah, at some point, whether it's at the beginning of the show or at the end of the show. You got to at least find a way to slide that topic in at least once. But we'll do our best from here on out to not do so, just depending on where these questions take us. This I really like this question because this is let's go as far away from that position as we possibly could, and this is from Omar Khan himself. Any expectations of having a punter battle for the starting job at Latrobe between Corliss Waitman and Cameron Johnston?
Not if Cameron Johnson is healthy. No. Cameron Johnson is very, very good. Now, he's had a devastating injury and he's not
Mm-hmm.
young. So, like,
Yes.
I don't think we should just assume that he's going to come back just as good as he was before. But if he's just as good as he was before, there's no battle.
What do you think? Because I wanted to bring up with Corliss, it seemed like as the season went on, like he was awesome at when he first stepped in middle parts of the season. I'm not saying he necessarily got bad, but I thought that there was enough of a drop off for me to notice towards the end of the year. Is that just because of like leg strength, or like what is the reason to you that was it the weather conditions towards the end of the season that's taking place in? Like, what do you think is the reason for that?
I think it's generally just like punting is like punting done well is generally like pretty low variance, but it only takes like a couple bad. Like the difference between the best punter and the worst punter is like 11 yards a net or something like that. Like it's not that
Mm-hmm.
big of it, you know. And so, um, but when you have a couple bad kicks, I think it like really takes the shine off a season. And I just think that's what we saw from Waitman. And I think that part of it's all mental. Like, I mean, maybe there's like you get into some like mechanical rut, or maybe certain punters have a more difficult time dealing with bad weather conditions. But in my experience talking with specialists, it's just mental. It's like golf. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, there's like physical stuff, but it's mostly just mental.
It's funny too, because like the specialists seem to be the best golfers a lot of the times on teams as well.
Yeah, well,
Like,
they have the most free time, so
yeah, that's true.
I don't know if that's the correlation or if it's the
Yeah.
other one.
We just talked about Jackson Dart, brought up Matthe Golden in terms of players that we expect to visit. Josh wants to know, when do we expect defensive line visits, among top guys to start happening, or could they not, to kind of hide their intentions?
The Steelers will not hide their intentions by passing on an opportunity to get more information about a prospect. They're just not going to do it. Um, when they have limited resources, they sometimes decide, okay, we feel like we know enough about this guy. And maybe you will see some of that. But like
Mm-hmm.
a guy like Derek Harmon, who they sent very minimal resources to his pro day. I
Right.
believe they did have a combine formal with him, but he wasn't at the Senior Bowl. I'm going to have a hard time buying him as the Steelers pick at 21 if he doesn't come for a pre-draft visit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, there are always exceptions to these rules. Like maybe they won't bring Will Johnson in for a pre-draft visit because they don't think he'll be there. And then, oh, he's there. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Got a top 10 corner. But I think of the guys that like they've done extensive business already. Jalen Milroe, saw him
Mm-hmm.
at the Senior Bowl, not a formal at the combine, but he was at the combine. They were there with him, and then sent the whole house, including the position coach, to his pro day. I'm not moving Jalen Milroe on my board whether or not he gets a 30 visit. Like it just doesn't. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I feel like they've probably seen enough there. Now, someone like Tyler Shuck, yeah, they saw him at the Senior Bowl. Okay, if they weren't bringing him in for a visit, though, I would be a little skeptical. But they are, and so I think you should include that there. So it's not black and white. I think
Mm-hmm.
Nolan, because he was at the Senior Bowl, and they did send, and like he didn't work at his pro day anyway. So like, yeah, they didn't go, but they didn't miss anything either.
Yeah.
They've probably taken a lot of chances with him already. So I don't know. Like, if Kenneth Grant doesn't come on a 30 visit, I'm going to be very surprised.
That's what I was going to ask about, because they obviously they were tied up with Aaron Rodgers that day of Michigan's pro day. Now, Tara Austin was there.
And I believe Andy Weidel went as well.
Okay. All right.
I don't know if that's been previously reported, but I was told that this week.
If it was, it went past me. So that's new information to me, at least. Not sure how many people in the afternoon drive community besides me. But yeah, there you go. That's the one I wanted to ask about, just because we've talked about him so much. Like if the draft were tomorrow, that's who think he would be their ideal pick at 21. But yeah, so far hasn't come in for top 30, and Tomlin and Khan were not at his pro day, but good to know that Andy was. All right. Schoolhouse Rocks here says, no, we've been looking at some top safety talents. What prospect would you think out of those guys would work best in a slot role?
Xavier Watts. That's the like hybrid positionless defensive back, the Brian Branch, the Kyle Hamilton, the Terrion Arnold, like that's the guy in this class. There are others that can do it. Jahdae Barron can probably do it.
Yeah.
But to me, he's the one. If you want like a Swiss Army knife defensive back, that's the one to get. Now, second round, I don't know how you do that because he'll be in between the Steelers picks, but that's the one I would
Probably
want
even if they still had their second round pick, would be thinking he's not getting to that second pick.
Yeah, it's probably a good shot. He's probably like
So
in the 40s.
yeah, absolutely. That's where I'm at. But that would absolutely be my instinct. As much as I love Jahdae Barron, one of my favorite players in this class. Yeah, in terms of what you described there, what you're looking for, I think it's Watts is the guy. I love those players that you threw in there as well too. Obviously, I think everybody's trying to find that. Like, look at the way that Brian Branch has kind of slept on through that process, ends up not even being a first round pick despite being so good. Kyle Hamilton obviously wasn't that case. Terrion Arnold did go in the first round, but not as high as some people expected. So yeah, Xavier Watts for me as well. Zachary says, great first name, by the way. How big of a need do we believe running back is in the upcoming draft? Where would you rank running back?
Well, it's a big need, but it's not a pressing one early in the draft because of the presence of Jaylen Warren, who I believe will be the starter no matter who they draft, and to a lesser extent Kenneth Gainwell, who's going to provide what I think is going to be really good depth there, and just the depth of the class and the lack of positional value, I think is all going to conspire to kind of push running back down the board. So it's a big need. They absolutely have to leave this draft with a running back. But it doesn't need to be before day 3 either. So I would say, to me, like, assuming they sign Aaron Rodgers, I think defensive tackle is head and shoulders above everything else as a need. And then you kind of have quarterback, wide receiver, cornerback, which are needs at positions of high value. And then you kind of have guard and running back, and you include safety in that group too, or whatever you want to call hybrid defensive back. And then guard and running back are like positions of need at low value. Like, you don't want to draft a guard in the first round or a running back starting on day 2, but I think probably realistically those guys you're looking at maybe third round, but probably fourth round and later.
You mentioned Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell in there, but not Cordero Patterson. Do you see him having a role? Like, do you think that he even makes this team?
I think there's a chance he can make the team, but I don't think I would assume, like, if he makes the team, to me, it's as running back 4 and kickoff returner.
Yeah.
Because
Gainwell has some value in kick return game.
Mike Tomlin said he expects Gainwell to return kicks this year. So
yeah.
Now that could be as a replacement for Warren, because I don't think they'll want Warren to be the starting running back and returning kicks.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, this question ties in. This just came in 2 minutes ago as we were recording here. But Butch said, if the Steelers stick at 21 and pick, what's the worst case scenario you could imagine? And the reason I'm bringing this one up right here, right now, is because the response to that was that they pick a running back over a defensive tackle or a quarterback at that spot.
The worst case scenario at 21. I think the worst case scenario at 21 is Jackson Dart. Yeah. Because I think if you are foolish enough to draft Jackson Dart at 21, unless you play him and he's just terrible, it's going to be hard to take another big swing at quarterback in 26. And I think that is a far better idea than going down that road. A running back, if Genty's there, running back's a great pick. I can't say I would react favorably to the Steelers taking like Amarian Hampton or Travion Henderson at 21. Like, I think those would be bad picks, but I would not pile on to the level that I would if it's Dart. I think that's probably the absolute worst case scenario.
Yeah, I think with
outside
this,
of
it's
just
also
taking someone who's just like not even on the board. Like,
right, yeah. I was just saying, I think that it's important to add the caveat here that we're considering like somewhat likely possibilities. What is the worst
like somebody
one out of them?
currently ranked in the top 50 Okay.
Who's
That's
the
probably
big defensive tackle out of Florida?
Cam Jackson. Oh,
No,
the
the
440-pound one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I can't remember his name. That would be a bad pick. Yes, that would be a bad pick.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
think the second part of what you said about Dart, though, like him preventing a pick in 26, that's necessary to add to that, because I think that is what makes it for me worse than if they did go with
and
like a
I don't
Hampton.
and I don't want people to get confused with me saying that would be a terrible pick with like me saying Jackson Dart would be awful. I think he's likely to be an average NFL starting quarterback. I just I think that's a that's a successful failure for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like I just
Mm-hmm.
you just put
Yeah.
yourself back into quarterback purgatory.
We're doing the thing where, like, we're not talking about Aaron Rodgers, but we're doing the quarterback thing again. But I mentioned, or no, I saw on Twitter something about Albert Breer. Man, I not a very favorable snippet
I
in
saw
his write
that,
up
and you know what?
of
I kind
Jackson
of
Dart.
disagree with it. He said he's a less athletic version of Kenny Pickett, and I think that's totally
Mm-hmm.
wrong. I think he's a more athletic version of Kenny Pickett with a way worse arm. Like, I think that's the part of it that I'm like, no, he's athletic. He just doesn't throw it very well.
Yeah, from an athleticism standpoint, I don't see, like, I know that I've talked, like, is he a super above average athlete? No, like, but Kenny wasn't either. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, he's a
they can
little
get the
more. I
job
think
done.
I think he will be a more effective runner at the NFL level than Pickett was. But like,
Mm-hmm.
he's not good. Like, not like a plus athlete. And yeah, not very accurate. Not great arm strength.
Aiden
Plays in a
here
gadget
said,
offense. That's the other part of it too. Is that plays in a
yeah.
gadget offense. And Pickett, you had the pro style offense in
Mm-hmm.
college that you could see him doing the exact things he would need to be doing in the NFL, which is why his floor was supposed to be so high and probably should have been, if not for, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, a failure of leadership, I guess, really, at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's, I think that's not because I think he's the worst player they could draft. Like, and like, I just think it would be the worst strategy.
Yeah, where everything else that they've done has said, about going in and like investing heavy in that position in 26, to then just like scrap all that and take the
And they're
swing in
and
25,
I'm
and then
operating under the assumption they're going to sign Rodgers when I say that as
yeah.
well. So like
Mm-hmm.
you'd be doing all that to draft Dart and not even play him as a rookie. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Just why?
Yeah. Who's the option at 21 that not enough people are talking about? Do you have like an under the radar name that you think could be taken at 21 that we really haven't? I mean, we've talked a lot about defensive tackles, obviously, Emeka Ibuka, heck, Jackson Dart,
Malachi
we just brought up
Starks,
there. Okay.
safety from Georgia. They had TA there running his workout.
Mm-hmm.
He's right in that range. I don't really understand the level that they've been involved in the safety position, but
Yeah.
I don't think we should ignore it either. And just because I don't understand it, like I think a lot of people have ignored it, and I don't think we should ignore it just because it doesn't make sense on the surface level. They're telling us they're interested in drafting a safety, even very highly, and he's right there in the 20s in most boards. So yeah, I
Is
think
Nick
that's one of
Manamori the same case there?
like he's like a
Or,
little bit later. I think like more of a trade back option probably,
okay.
and like to me less of an obvious like this is a make a replacement kind of
Mm-hmm.
pick, which would make even less sense to me. But they did send Joe Alexander to his pro day, and I'm not going to ignore that either. But yeah, I think like safety in the first round is the position that nobody's talking about that probably we should at least a little bit.
Yeah. I don't know. Is there another corner that could, like, other than Will Johnson following in the board being specific to that? Is there another one that should, like Siobhan Revel? I know some people have thrown them like maybe months ago had him there. I don't know if he's going to go at 21 coming off, obviously not playing last year, but
Yeah, Revel and Morrison were both kind of guys that
mhm,
were pegged to be first round picks, got injured last year. Ravel was early in the year. Morrison was late in the year. I think Morrison didn't work out at his pro day, if I remember right. I don't think Ravel has done anything. It's hard to keep your name high on people's boards, but it would not be crazy for the Steelers
Hmm.
to still have those guys sort of where everyone else had them in November. Like
Hmm.
that's not nuts. It's a little risky, but it's not nuts.
Um, Chris says if Pickens were to be traded before or during the draft, say to retrieve a second round pick, would the replacement receiver be a high priority in your opinion? If so, what type are we looking for, X, Y, or Z, in for that replacement?
Yeah, I would put it at pretty high priority. I mean, I think then you would elevate wide receiver on almost equal footing with defensive tackle at that point. Um, I think a Z receiver is something they need no matter what, whether they have George or not. If you don't have George, then you probably also need another X. So I think you could go either route with it if you're using a high draft pick. And a lot of those guys are pretty interchangeable as well. Like I don't know what I would call. I mean, obviously Trey Harris is an X, but like
Hmm.
what do you call Matthe Golden? He's probably a Z. I don't know. Um, Emeka Ibuka is definitely a slaughter Z. Um, I, I would say just in general, they need a Z, and they would need to highly draft an outside wide receiver. But I don't think it would have to be a Z, as long as it's not like just not that there's anyone who's going to come close to duplicating DK Metcalf in this draft class. So yeah. I mean, any of those guys would work, I think. Except for just, I would stay away from people that are purely slot limited.
Hmm. Honest, a lot of the people I think seeing the Matthe Golden thing now because we get a couple questions as we're recording here that relate to it. But with him coming in now for a 30, was like first off, I guess where did you put the likelihood of receiver at 21? Like, is that the second position right behind defensive tackle? And now with Matthe Golden come in, and does your mind change on that depending on where you were with it to begin with?
I've kind of been for a while that there are like seven really good possibilities. It's the three D tackles, the three wide receivers, and Barron. Um,
Mm.
with maybe like them not showing any real interest in Luther Burden, like kind of pushing him to the very bottom of that group.
Okay.
Um, I'm a little skeptical of Golden because I don't really trust the lack, like the production is in such a short time period. Um, but he's got tantalizing traits. There's no question
Yeah.
about that.
Hmm.
I think it's a player that if you're going to draft, you're definitely going to want to do a lot of work on. So it doesn't surprise me that they're bringing him in. Necessarily, they bring Golden in having already been to his pro day, and they don't bring a Buka in having already been. I don't think that would be telling me they like Golden more. I think it would be telling me that my daughter could tell that Emeka Buka is going to be a good NFL wide receiver, and Matthe Golden is a lot more risky proposition, and they probably need to do a lot more research.
Yeah, much bigger swing, which is why this is the last thing that I wanted to bring up here as it relates to this. Is we've talked about obviously different position, and quarterback's a whole different ball game in terms of evaluating it and needing to hit on that position. I mean, you need to hit everywhere, obviously, but it's much more detrimental when you don't there. We've talked about maybe not having the faith for the Steelers to develop, depending on who the quarterback they would bring in is. Like, is the structure in place for them to do so? As it relates to Matthe Golden in the wide receiver spot, where you feel like it's a little bit of a swing, is it one worth taking? Like, not so if the board falls a certain way, Matthe Golden looks like he's probably the best player there. Is that a swing worth taking in your mind, or just the lack of production scare you away enough?
I think it would scare me a lot, but I think it's a risk that you can justify taking because I think the upside is there. I'm generally team upside. I'm generally like,
Yeah.
you know, don't make low payoff risks. And there is a risk in every player, even if I think the risk in someone like Aguk is very low. I just think Ibuka is so unique in terms of his character at that position. That makes him really attractive to me.
Yeah. No, I
And
agree.
so
I think there's a
I
lot
would have
of
a hard
built-in
time.
value.
I would have a hard time prioritizing Golden over Ibuka picks for the slot. If Ibuka's not there, I would not have an issue with taking Golden at 21.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll see. We'll see how many more top 30s come from that spot. We'll see how many of the top defensive tackles, if they do. We'll see if Jackson Dart does come in tomorrow or when that does happen for a 30. It's already been reported that's happening. Just got to see when it is. As Alan continues his journey home here, Alan, until tomorrow. Tell the people they can find you.
Thursday or Friday.
Oh, go ahead. Okay. There you go. There we go.
Yeah, Dart will be Thursday or Friday.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, until tomorrow, I should say, tell the people where they can find you.
Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now. Sites account SteelersNow.com. Really need you to go to SteelersNow.com, read the articles so I can get paid, or just sign up for SN Plus. And then, even if you don't read the articles, I get paid. But also, when you do, you get to read them without ads, which is so much better. Literally got a text message from a reader today. It was like, how do I read this with all the ads? And I said, this is how you do it. Right here. Half a Chick-fil-A sandwich per month.
I guess that's what we're doing now instead of the Wendy's.
I'm trying to vary it up. Wendy's ain't paying us.
Yeah, you're right. They aren't. Real quick, this literally just came in. I gotta get it for my guy JB here. Is there a player, 3rd, 4th round pick, kind of within that range that you think you really like? Should go higher, but you believe is in that range that he'll go?
Joshua Farmer, defensive tackle from Florida State. I've seen in the 3rd round a lot. I really like him. Try to throw one out there from a different position. I mean, running back, there's lots of them down there that we've talked about.
Yeah. That's why I'm going to steer away from my typical Bashal Tootin pick for this question. I'm going to go, I don't know which, Ty Felton. You think he's probably 3rd, 4th round pick?
That's
probably?
A really good answer.
And Jalen Reed.
Kyle Williams is another good wide receiver late.
Yes.
Quincy Riley from Louisville, if you want a corner, I really like him. He's been 4th round for a while. I think that's undervalued.
There we
go. You want a late running back? Marcus Yarns from Delaware. I'm not going to stop talking about that guy until the Philadelphia Eagles draft him.
Oh, no.
It's happening.
Oh. All right. Well, you heard it here. If it does happen, you know where to come and air your grievances when Marcus Yarns ends up being a very good player in the NFL for the Philadelphia Eagles. Anyways, drop some questions, drop some topics down below. Let us know how you feel about topics and questions we discussed on this show. If you are here on YouTube, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell as we continue our journey. I swear this is the 4th time that we've been on this number, Alan. It's on 50 again, which is great that we're having the growth that we are and gaining 100 every couple episodes. But I've run out of 50s.
It's a tough number, man.
Yeah.
I don't know that
I got a 50 behind me, autographed from E-Rob, but
yeah, I don't know of. And of course, Shazier we've talked about. It's not a great number.
I mean, we've talked about Larry Foote, obviously. Who else? I don't know. So if you guys have a 50 beyond the ones that we brought up on here, let me know and I'll get you a subscription to SN Plus.
Right.
I'll be very impressed. And somebody can Google it, but you know what? Honor system. I'll believe you if you were able to come up with a 50. If you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe over there. You can drop questions over there too in the form of a review, and we'll get to them. I'm always checking on them. Love when people leave us a real long review telling us a story about meeting up with another Steelers fan in Flagstaff, Arizona. So keep dropping those.
Involving pizza also. For sure.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So do that. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive and do that. Do the same thing on TikTok, and then you'll find me everywhere. Zachary Smith, PGH, for Alan Saunders, and myself. Thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.